My daughter threw my bags onto the sidewalk and shouted, "Now that my mother is dead, I don't want a useless old man like you around. This house was never yours anyway," my son-in-law said. But when he tried to sell the house, the bank immediately called me. "I'm glad to have you here. Follow my story until the end and comment the city you're watching from so I can see how far my story has reached. I never thought my own daughter would throw me out like garbage on the day we buried her mother. The funeral had been beautiful, or at least that's what everyone kept telling me. Martha would have loved the white roses, they said. She would have appreciated the turnout. But all I could think about was how empty our house would feel without her laughter echoing through the halls, without her humming while she made coffee in the mornings. I was still wearing my black suit when Allison cornered me in the kitchen. My daughter looked different somehow, harder than I remembered. Her designer dress probably cost more than I spent on groceries in 3 months, and her perfectly manicured nails clicked against the granite countertop as she crossed her arms. "Dad, we need to talk," she said, but her tone wasn't the gentle voice of a grieving daughter. It was cold, businesslike. Barry stood behind her, that smug expression he always wore now permanently etched on his face. My son-in-law had never liked me, but at least he used to pretend. After Martha got sick, even that pretense had disappeared. "Can't this wait?" I asked, loosening my tie. "It's been a long day and I'm exhausted." Allison exchanged a glance with Barry. He nodded, like they'd rehearsed this moment. "No, Dad, it can't wait." She took a deep breath, and for a split second, I thought I saw my little girl again, the one who used to crawl into my lap when she had nightmares. But then her expression hardened again. "You can't stay here anymore." The words hit me like a physical blow. I gripped the back of a chair to steady myself. "What do you mean I can't stay here? This is my home. Your mother and I lived here for 32 years. Barry stepped forward, his voice dripping with false sympathy. "Lawrence, let's be realistic here. You're 65 years old, you're alone now, and this house is way too big for just you. It doesn't make financial sense." "Financial sense?" I stared at him. "This isn't about money, Barry. This is about my home." Allison sighed, like I was being unreasonable. "Dad, you have to understand. Mom's medical bills were enormous. The funeral costs, the hospital stays, all of it. We need to sell this house to settle everything." I felt the blood drain from my face. "Sell the house? Allison, your mother just died. We buried her 3 hours ago." "I know this is hard," she said, but her voice lacked any real compassion. "But life goes on. Barry and I have been talking, and we think it's best if you find somewhere smaller to live. Maybe one of those senior communities where you can make friends your own age." The casual cruelty of it took my breath away. Friends my own age. As if Martha hadn't been my best friend for decades. "This house has been in your mother's family for generations," I said, my voice shaking. "Every room holds memories of our life together, of your childhood. How can you even suggest—" "That's exactly the problem," Barry interrupted. "You're living in the past, Lawrence. Martha's gone. She's not coming back, and sitting in this big empty house isn't going to change that." I looked at my daughter, searching her face for any sign of the child I'd raised. The girl I'd taught to ride a bike, helped with homework, walked down the aisle just 5 years ago. But all I saw was a stranger wearing my daughter's face. "Allison, please, I just lost your mother. Don't make me lose my home too." She looked uncomfortable for a moment. Then Barry put his hand on her shoulder. "We've already packed your things," he said matter-of-factly. "Just the essentials. There's a nice extended stay motel about 10 minutes from here. We'll cover the first week." "You packed my things?" The room started spinning. "You went through my belongings while I was at my wife's funeral? We wanted to make this as easy as possible for you," Allison said, but she couldn't meet my eyes. I felt rage building in my chest, hot and unfamiliar. In 43 years of marriage, I'd never been an angry man. Martha used to joke that she got enough temper for both of us. But this betrayal, this calculated cruelty from my own child, awakened something dark inside me. "Easy for me?" My voice rose. "You think throwing your father out of his home on the day he buried his wife is easy?" Barry stepped between us. "Lower your voice, Lawrence. You're getting hysterical." "Hysterical?" I almost laughed. "My daughter is stealing my home and you're calling me hysterical?" "Nobody's stealing anything," Allison snapped. "This house was never really yours anyway. It belonged to Mom's family. You just lived here." The words cut deeper than any physical wound. 32 years of marriage, of building a life together, of believing we were partners in everything, reduced to, you just lived here. Your mother and I were married, I said quietly. What was hers was mine. What was mine was hers. That's how marriage works. Barry laughed, actually laughed. Is that what you told yourself? Come on, Lawrence. You worked at the hardware store for 40 years. You think your paycheck paid for this place? The humiliation burned in my throat. He was right, of course. Martha had inherited the house from her grandmother. Her teacher's pension was more than my salary ever was. But we'd never talked about it like that. We'd been a team. Your bags are by the front door, Allison said, her voice barely above a whisper. I'll drive you to the motel. I stood there for a long moment, looking around the kitchen where Martha had made thousands of meals, where we'd shared countless conversations over coffee, where she'd held my hand and made me promise I'd be okay without her. I can't believe you're doing this to me, I said. Allison's face crumpled for just a second, and I thought maybe I'd reached her. But then Barry whispered something in her ear, and her expression hardened again. It's for the best, Dad. You'll see. I walked to the front door like a man in a dream. 2 suitcases and a cardboard box sat on the porch. 43 years of marriage, 65 years of life, reduced to what fit in the trunk of my daughter's car. As she pulled out of the driveway, I looked back at the house one last time. The home where I'd expected to live out my remaining years, where I'd planned to tend Martha's garden and remember her in every corner. Now it was just a building that someone else would soon own. The weight of it all hit me at once. I was homeless, nearly broke, and utterly alone. My daughter, the little girl I'd loved more than life itself, had chosen money over her father's heart, and the cruelest part was, I had no idea how much worse things were about to get. The Sunset Inn wasn't the worst place I'd ever been, but it came pretty close. The room smelled like stale cigarettes and industrial cleaning fluid. The carpet had stains I didn't want to think about, and the air conditioning unit rattled like it was about to die. But it was what I could afford with the $300 cash I had in my wallet and whatever was left in my checking account. I sat on the edge of the bed, still wearing my funeral suit, staring at my 2 suitcases. Allison had packed them, and I could tell she'd done it quickly, carelessly. My favorite sweater was wrinkled into a ball. My reading glasses were missing. She'd forgotten to pack my blood pressure medication. The silence was deafening. For 32 years, I'd shared my evenings with Martha. Even when she was sick, especially when she was sick, we'd filled the quiet with conversation, with her stories about her students, with plans for the future we thought we'd have together. Now there was nothing but the sound of traffic outside my window, and the couple next door arguing through the thin walls. I picked up my phone to call someone, anyone, then realized I didn't know who to call. Martha had been my social life. Her friends had been our friends. My coworkers from the hardware store were nice enough, but we'd never been close. Retirement had been lonelier than I'd expected, even with Martha there. The phone rang in my hands, startling me so badly I almost dropped it. Mr. Lawrence Whitmore? The voice was professional, female. Yes, that's me. This is Jessica Chen from First National Bank. I'm calling regarding some irregularities we've detected concerning your property at 1247 Elm Street. My heart started pounding. What kind of irregularities? Sir, we received documentation today indicating that you're attempting to sell the property. However, our records show some discrepancies that need to be resolved before any sale can proceed. I gripped the phone tighter. I'm not trying to sell anything. I don't understand. There was a pause. Sir, are you currently at the Elm Street property? No, I looked around the depressing motel room. I'm staying somewhere else temporarily. Mr. Whitmore, I think we need to discuss this in person. Would you be available to come in tomorrow morning? There are some documents you need to see. After I hung up, I sat in the gathering darkness trying to make sense of what I'd just heard. Barry and Allison were trying to sell the house already. Martha had been dead for exactly 1 day, and they were already moving forward with their plans. The cruelty of it made my stomach turn, but something else bothered me too. The bank representative had sounded confused, like something didn't add up. What kind of discrepancies? I barely slept that night. Every time I dozed off, I'd wake up reaching for Martha, forgetting for a split second that she was gone, that I wasn't in our bedroom anymore. The grief hit fresh each time. A wave of loss so powerful it left me gasping. By 6 a.m., I was showered and dressed. I walked to a diner down the street for coffee and tried to eat some toast, but everything tasted like cardboard. The waitress, a kind woman about my age, kept refilling my cup and asking if I was okay. "Just lost my wife," I told her, and she nodded with the understanding of someone who'd seen plenty of grief come through her doors. "It gets easier," she said. "Not better, but easier." At 9 o'clock sharp, I was sitting in Jessica Chen's office at the bank. She was younger than I'd expected, probably in her 30s, with kind eyes and a no-nonsense manner. "Mr. Whitmore, I'm going to show you something, and I need you to tell me if you recognize it." She slid a document across the desk. It looked official, with lots of legal language, but at the top, in bold letters, it said, "Quitclaim deed." I squinted at it, wishing I had my reading glasses. "I'm sorry, but I can't read the fine print. What is this?" "It's a document transferring ownership of your property from Martha Whitmore to Lawrence Whitmore. It's dated 3 years ago and was filed with the county recorder's office." The words hit me like a punch to the gut. "That's impossible. Martha never mentioned anything like this." Jessica leaned forward. "Mr. Whitmore, according to our records, you became the sole legal owner of 1247 Elm Street on March 15th, 3 years ago. The transfer was handled by Patterson and Associates law firm." Patterson? I knew that name. Richard Patterson had been Martha's lawyer for years, had helped her with her will, handled some family estate issues. "There's more," Jessica continued. "Yesterday, we received a request to process the sale of this property. The paperwork was signed by someone claiming to be you. But when I compared the signatures, they didn't match our records. That's why I called." She showed me another document. The signature was close to mine, but not quite right. The L in Lawrence was too loopy. The W in Whitmore too angular. "Barry," I whispered. "Excuse me?" "My son-in-law. He must have forged my signature." The realization was sinking in slowly, like cold water filling my lungs. "He doesn't know the house is in my name." Jessica nodded. "That would explain the discrepancy. Mr. Whitmore, attempting to sell property through forgery is a serious crime. We've flagged the transaction and contacted the authorities." I stared at the quitclaim deed, my vision blurring. Martha had done this. 3 years ago, when her cancer first came back, she'd secretly transferred the house to my name. She'd never said a word about it. "Why would she do this?" I asked, more to myself than to Jessica. "In my experience, people usually transfer property to protect it. Maybe she was worried about medical bills or estate taxes or," she paused delicately, "family complications." Family complications. Had Martha known? Had she suspected that our daughter would do something like this? I thought back to 3 years ago. Allison and Barry had been having money problems. Barry's construction business was struggling, and they'd asked Martha for help several times. She'd always given it, but I remembered her being uncomfortable about it, especially when Barry started suggesting she should consider him more in her will. "Mr. Whitmore?" Jessica's voice pulled me back to the present. "Are you all right?" I looked at her. This kind stranger who just handed me back my life. "The house is really mine. Legally, yes. Your wife made sure of that." For the first time since Martha died, I felt something other than grief. It wasn't quite hope, not yet, but it wasn't despair either. What happens now? "Well, the attempted sale is blocked, and since someone forged your signature, the police will want to investigate. But Mr. Whitmore, I have to ask, are you safe? If your family was willing to forge documents." I thought about the cold calculation in Barry's eyes, the way Allison had avoided looking at me when they threw me out. They'd planned this, probably for months. They'd waited for Martha to die, then moved immediately to claim what they thought was theirs. But Martha had been one step ahead of them. I stood up, my legs steadier than they'd been in days. "Jessica, I need to ask you a favor. Please don't contact anyone about this yet. I need some time to figure out what to do next." She looked concerned. "Mr. Whitmore, if you're in danger." "I'm not in danger," I said, though I wasn't entirely sure that was true. "But I need to understand why my wife did this without telling me, and I need to decide how to handle my daughter." As I walked out of the bank, the morning sun felt warmer on my face. I was still homeless, still heartbroken, still betrayed by the child I'd raised, but now I knew something that Barry and Allison didn't. The house they thought they were stealing had never been theirs to take. I had a key to my own house, but using it felt like breaking and entering. Standing on the front porch at 2 in the afternoon, I listened for any sounds inside. Barry's truck wasn't in the driveway, and Allison's car was gone too. They probably thought they had all the time in the world to go through Martha's things, to inventory what they believed would soon be theirs. The house felt different when I stepped inside. Colder somehow, even though the thermostat was set the same as always. It smelled wrong too, like Barry's cologne had infected the air Martha and I used to breathe together. I stood in the entryway for a long moment, overwhelmed by memories. The grandfather clock Martha had inherited from her grandmother still ticked in the corner. The family photos still lined the hallway walls, though I noticed some were missing. Probably the ones with just Martha and me, the ones that didn't fit whatever story they were telling themselves about this house. But I wasn't here for nostalgia. I was here for answers. Martha had been organized to a fault. If she'd transferred the house to my name 3 years ago, she would have kept records. She would have had reasons, probably written down somewhere in that methodical way of hers. I headed straight for her desk in the small room we'd called the office. Barry and Allison had clearly been through it already. Drawers were left half open, papers scattered. They'd been looking for financial documents, probably trying to figure out exactly what they stood to inherit. Martha's filing system was still intact, though. She'd labeled everything in her careful handwriting: insurance, medical, household, legal. I pulled out the legal file with shaking hands. The quit-claim deed was there, along with a copy of a letter to Richard Patterson, her lawyer. But underneath those documents I found something that made my blood run cold. A manila envelope marked, "For Lawrence, only if something happens to me." Inside were 3 letters, each dated and sealed. The first was dated 3 years ago, right around the time she'd transferred the house. The second was from 18 months ago. The third was just 6 months old, written when her cancer came back with a vengeance. I sat down in her chair and opened the oldest letter with trembling fingers. "My dearest Lawrence," it began in Martha's familiar script. "If you're reading this, then I'm gone and you've discovered what I did with the house. I pray you understand why I felt I had to do this without telling you." My throat tightened. Even from beyond the grave, Martha was still trying to protect me. 3 weeks ago, Barry approached me about including him in my will. Not asking Lawrence, demanding. He had papers drawn up, legal documents he wanted me to sign. He said it was smart estate planning. But when I read the fine print, it would have given him power of attorney over all our assets if something happened to you. I had to stop reading for a moment. Barry had tried to manipulate Martha into signing away our life together. While I'd been at work, while I'd trusted him as family, he'd been scheming to take everything. The letter continued. When I refused, he got angry. He said some terrible things about you, Lawrence. About how you were dead weight, and how Allison deserved better than taking care of an old man with nothing to offer. He actually said I was being selfish by not thinking about our daughter's future. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely hold the paper. I realized then that this had been planned for a long time. Barry has been poisoning Allison's mind against you, making her believe that you're somehow a burden on the family. Our beautiful daughter, who used to adore you, now talks about you like you're a problem to be solved. I thought about the way Allison had looked at me at the funeral like I was a stranger. Like I was something unpleasant she had to deal with. How long had Barry been working on her? So I transferred the house to you, my love. Richard Patterson helped me set it up so that even if something happens to both of us, you'll be protected. The house will be yours, free and clear. Barry will never be able to touch it. The letter was signed with Martha's usual endearment. Forever yours, M. But there were 2 more letters. The second one, from 18 months ago, was shorter but more urgent. Lawrence, Barry's gambling debts are worse than I thought. Mrs. Henderson from next door told me she saw strange men at his house last week asking questions about him. He owes money to dangerous people. I'm worried he's going to try something desperate. Gambling debts. That explained a lot. Barry's construction business hadn't been struggling because of the economy. He'd been gambling away their income and now he needed money fast. The third letter, dated just 6 months ago when Martha was already getting sicker, was the most heartbreaking. My dearest husband, I know I don't have much time left. The treatments aren't working, and I can see it in Dr. Peterson's eyes. But I'm not afraid of dying, Lawrence. I'm afraid of leaving you alone with them. I had to wipe my eyes to keep reading. Barry has convinced Allison that you're going senile. He's been telling her stories about you forgetting things, getting confused, maybe even becoming dangerous. None of it is true. But she believes him because she wants to believe him. It's easier than admitting her husband is a manipulative liar. My chest felt tight. Martha had known all of this and carried it alone while she was dying. While I'd been focused on doctor appointments and treatments and trying to make her comfortable. She'd been fighting a war I didn't even know was happening. I've been documenting everything, Lawrence. The conversations I've overheard, the papers Barry has tried to get me to sign, the lies he's told about you. It's all in the safe behind my jewelry box. Richard Patterson has copies of everything too. The safe. I'd forgotten about the small safe Martha kept in our bedroom closet. She'd given me the combination years ago, but I'd never had reason to use it. I made my way upstairs, my legs feeling like lead. Our bedroom looked the same, but I could tell someone had been through Martha's things. Her jewelry box was open, some pieces missing. They'd probably taken anything that looked valuable, but they hadn't found the safe. Behind the jewelry box, just as Martha had said, was a small wall safe I'd helped her install 15 years ago. My fingers remembered the combination, our wedding date. Inside were stacks of documents, photographs, and what looked like audio recordings on small digital devices. Martha had been busier than I'd ever imagined. The first folder was labeled Barry's Debts. Inside were copies of loan documents, collection notices, and photographs of official-looking men outside Barry and Allison's house. Martha had somehow gotten access to information about Barry's gambling, including records showing he owed nearly $50,000 to some very unpleasant people. Another folder contained transcripts of phone conversations. Martha had been recording calls, including one where Barry explicitly told Allison that I was losing my marbles, and that they needed to take control before the old man does something stupid. But the folder that made my heart sink was labeled Allison. Inside were photographs of my daughter meeting with a real estate agent, looking at houses that were way beyond what she and Barry should have been able to afford. There were also copies of credit card statements showing expensive purchases, designer clothes, jewelry, restaurant bills that totaled more than I'd made in a month. At the bottom of the safe was one final envelope. This one wasn't a letter. It was a legal document from Richard Patterson, dated just 2 weeks before Martha died. It was a restraining order against Barry, already prepared and notarized, waiting only for my signature. According to the attached notes from Patterson, Martha had documented enough evidence of Barry's manipulation and potential fraud to have him legally barred from coming near me or the house. She'd done everything except file it, leaving that choice to me. I sat on the edge of the bed Martha and I had shared for 3 decades, surrounded by evidence of a conspiracy I'd been too trusting to see. My wife had spent her final months protecting me from people I'd considered family, fighting battles I'd never known were being fought. The cruelest irony was that Barry and Allison thought they were so clever, manipulating a grieving old man out of his home. They had no idea that Martha had been 10 steps ahead of them from the beginning. I picked up one of the digital recorders and pressed play. Barry's voice filled the room, clear and unmistakable. The old man's not going to be a problem much longer. Once Martha's gone, we'll have him in a nursing home within a month. Maybe sooner if we can prove he's incompetent. Allison's voice responded, and hearing it made my heart break all over again. I know it sounds harsh, but Dad's never really taken care of himself. Mom did everything for him. He'll be better off somewhere with professional care. Professional care, my ass, Barry laughed. He'll be out of the way and we'll have the house. Win-win. I turned off the recorder and sat in the silence of the bedroom where Martha had drawn her last breath. She'd known exactly what kind of people they were, and she'd died trying to protect me from them. Now it was my turn to decide what to do with the weapon she'd left me. Richard Patterson looked exactly like a lawyer should. Gray hair, expensive suit, and the kind of serious expression that made you believe he'd seen every form of human greed imaginable. His office was all mahogany and leather, the walls lined with law books and framed diplomas. But what struck me most was the sympathy in his eyes when I walked in. This wasn't just business for him. He genuinely cared about Martha. "Lawrence," he said, standing up to shake my hand. "I'm so sorry for your loss. Martha was a remarkable woman." "Thank you." I sat down in the chair across from his desk, feeling small and overwhelmed. "I found the letters she left me, and the safe." He nodded gravely. "I wondered when you'd discover everything. Martha made me promise not to contact you unless you came to me first. She said you needed to find out the truth in your own time, in your own way. How long did you know about Barry and Allison?" Patterson leaned back in his chair, his fingers steepled. "Martha first came to me about 2.5 years ago. Barry had been pressuring her to restructure her will, to set up trusts that would give him more control. When she showed me the documents he'd prepared, I knew we had a problem." He pulled out a thick file folder. The papers Barry wanted her to sign would have essentially made him the executor of her estate with broad powers to make decisions about your care and finances. If Martha had died without changing things, Barry would have had legal authority over your life. The thought made me sick. And Allison? Did she know what Barry was planning? The Patterson's expression darkened. That's where it gets complicated. Martha hired a private investigator to document Barry's activities. We needed evidence if this ever went to court. He handed me a manila folder. What we found was worse than Martha initially suspected. Inside were photographs, bank statements, and what looked like medical records. I squinted at them, still missing my reading glasses. Barry has been systematically building a case that you're suffering from dementia, Patterson explained. He's been talking to neighbors, telling them he's concerned about your memory. He's documented incidents that never happened, created a paper trail suggesting you've been having episodes. My hands were shaking as I looked at the fake medical evaluations, the fabricated incident reports. This is all lies. Of course it is, but Barry's been very clever about it. He's told people he's worried about you, that he doesn't want to embarrass you, but that the family needs to keep an eye on you. He's painted himself as the concerned son-in-law, trying to protect his wife's father. The manipulation was breathtaking in its scope. How many people believed him? More than you'd like to know. Mrs. Henderson next door, Tom from the hardware store, even Dr. Morrison from your old practice. Barry approached them all, very concerned, very convincing. I remembered running into Tom a few months ago. He'd asked me how I was feeling, if I was managing okay since Martha got sick. At the time, I'd thought he was just being kind. Now I realized he'd been checking to see if I showed signs of the decline Barry had been describing. There's more, Patterson continued. Barry's been in contact with several assisted living facilities. He's filled out preliminary paperwork to have you evaluated for placement. The folder contained brochures for nursing homes, some of them quite expensive, others that looked more like warehouses for forgotten elderly people. All of them had Barry's contact information listed as the primary family contact. He's been planning this for years, I said, the full scope of the betrayal finally sinking in. Martha realized that Barry wasn't just after the house. He wanted complete control over your life, the nursing home placement, the dementia narrative, even the power of attorney papers. It was all designed to make you disappear. Patterson leaned forward, his voice lowering. Lawrence, there's something else. Something Martha discovered just before she died. He pulled out another set of documents. These looked different, more official. Barry approached Martha's doctor, Dr. Peterson, 6 weeks before she passed. He suggested that Martha might be making irrational decisions because of her pain medication. He wanted Dr. Peterson to evaluate her mental competency. I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. He tried to have Martha declared incompetent while she was dying. Dr. Peterson refused, of course, but Barry was persistent. He suggested that Martha's decisions about the house, about her will, were signs that the cancer had affected her judgment. He wanted her declared unable to make legal decisions. The cruelty of it was staggering. Barry had been willing to torture my dying wife, to add legal battles to her final weeks, just to get his hands on our property. What did Dr. Peterson do? He called Martha directly. That's when she realized how far Barry was willing to go. She asked me to expedite the restraining order paperwork, but she died before we could file it. Patterson handed me the restraining order Martha had prepared. It was comprehensive, detailing Barry's harassment, his attempts to manipulate both Martha and me, and his fraudulent claims about my mental state. This is still valid, Patterson said. We can file it today if you want. I stared at the document. Martha's signature was already there, waiting for mine. Even in her final weeks fighting cancer and Barry simultaneously, she'd been trying to protect me. There's one more thing, Patterson said quietly. The private investigator also looked into Barry's gambling debts. The people he owes money to aren't the kind who accept payment plans. He showed me photographs of men in expensive suits visiting Barry and Allison's house. The pictures were taken with a telephoto lens, but you could see the tension in Barry's body language, the fear in his face. Martha was worried that Barry might try something desperate. The house isn't just a prize to him, it's his survival. If he can't come up with the money he owes, those men in the photographs aren't going to be patient much longer. I thought about the calculated way Barry had thrown me out of my own home. The speed with which they'd tried to sell it. They hadn't just been greedy. They'd been desperate. How much does he owe? Close to $70,000, from what our investigator could determine, and it's growing every week with interest and penalties. $70,000. No wonder Barry had been so focused on the house. It was his only way out. "What about Allison?" I asked, though part of me didn't want to know. "How much does she know about Barry's gambling?" Patterson's expression was sympathetic but grim. "That's the tragic part, Lawrence. We don't think she knows about the debts at all. Barry has convinced her that your mental decline is the real problem, that taking the house is actually protecting you from making poor decisions." He showed me more transcripts from Martha's recordings. In conversation after conversation, Barry painted me as confused, forgetful, potentially dangerous. He told Allison stories about finding me wandering around the house at night, about me leaving the stove on, about me getting lost driving to familiar places. None of it was true, but Barry was a convincing liar. "Your daughter genuinely believes she's doing the right thing," Patterson said. "Barry has made her think that putting you in a care facility is an act of love, not abandonment." The manipulation was so complete, so systematic, that I almost admired its thoroughness. Barry had turned my own daughter against me while convincing her it was for my own good. "What do I do now?" I asked. Patterson leaned back in his chair. "That depends on what you want to accomplish. Do you want your daughter back? Do you want Barry punished? Do you just want to be left alone?" I thought about Martha's letters, about the years of love and trust Barry had systematically destroyed. I thought about Allison throwing my belongings onto the porch, calling me a burden, treating me like a stranger. "I want the truth to come out," I said finally. "I want Allison to know what kind of man she married, and I want Barry to face consequences for what he's done." Patterson nodded. "Then we have work to do. The evidence Martha gathered is extensive, but we need to be strategic about how we use it. Barry is desperate, and desperate people do dangerous things." He opened his calendar. "I suggest we start by filing the restraining order. That will legally prevent Barry from coming near you or the house. Then we can decide how to approach Allison with the evidence." As I left Patterson's office, I felt like I was carrying the weight of Martha's love and protection with me. She'd spent her final months building a fortress of legal documents and recorded evidence around me, anticipating Barry's every move. Now I had to decide whether to use the weapons she'd left me, or try to find a way to save the daughter I'd lost to Barry's lies. Either way, the war Martha had been fighting in secret was about to become very public. I waited 3 days after filing the restraining order before making my move. 3 days of staying in that terrible motel room, of eating diner food and watching the phone ring with calls from numbers I didn't recognize. Barry and Allison had been trying to reach me since the bank called them about the blocked sale. I could only imagine the panic they were feeling. But I wasn't ready to talk to them yet. I needed to be stronger, more prepared. I needed to decide exactly what I wanted to say to my daughter when I saw her face again. Richard Patterson had advised me to let him handle everything through legal channels, to stay away from direct confrontation. But this wasn't just about law and property rights. This was about a father's love for his child, about trying to save Allison from the man who had poisoned her heart against me. I chose a Thursday evening for the confrontation. I knew Barry had a poker game every Thursday night, information I'd gleaned from Martha's investigative files. He'd be out until late, leaving Allison alone. Standing on the porch of their house, I felt my heart hammering against my ribs. This was my daughter's home, but I'd only been inside a handful of times. Barry had never made me feel welcome here, and over the years, I'd stopped trying. Allison opened the door wearing yoga pants and an old college sweatshirt. For a moment, seeing her dressed down and casual, she looked like the little girl who used to curl up with me to watch Saturday morning cartoons. Then her expression hardened. "Dad." Her voice was cold. "What are you doing here?" "I came to talk to you." She glanced past me toward the street, probably checking to see if I'd brought a car. I'd taken a taxi, not trusting myself to drive with my hands shaking the way they were. "Barry's not here," she said. "I know. I came to talk to you alone." She hesitated, then stepped back to let me in. The house was nice enough, though I could see the stress in the details. Bills stacked on the kitchen counter, a notice from the electric company visible on top. The kind of financial pressure that made people do desperate things. We sat in her living room, an uncomfortable distance between us on the sectional sofa. Allison tucked her legs underneath her, a defensive posture I remembered from her teenage years. "Dad, about the house," she started. Allison, I need you to listen to me. Really listen. Can you do that? Something in my tone must have gotten through to her because she nodded, though her expression remained guarded. I pulled out copies of some of the documents Martha had left me. Not everything. I wasn't ready to devastate her completely, but enough to start the conversation. 3 years ago, your mother transferred the house to my name. She never told me about it, but she left me letters explaining why she did it. Allison frowned. That's impossible. Mom would have told us about something like that. I handed her the quitclaim deed. She studied it, her brow furrowing as she read the legal language. This doesn't make sense, she said. Why would Mom do this without telling anyone? Because she was afraid, Allison. She was afraid of what would happen to me after she was gone. I gave her Martha's first letter, the one explaining Barry's attempt to get power of attorney. Allison read it slowly, her face growing paler with each paragraph. Mom thought Barry was trying to steal from you. Not just steal, honey. He wanted control over my entire life. The power of attorney papers he wanted your mother to sign would have given him the right to put me in a nursing home, to sell all our possessions, to make every decision about my care and finances. Allison was shaking her head. No, that's not. Barry loves you, Dad. He's always been concerned about your well-being. Has he? Or has he been telling you that I'm losing my mind? The question hung in the air between us. I watched as Allison's certainty wavered, as doubt crept into her expression. Barry's mentioned that you've seemed confused lately, she said carefully. Forgetful. He's worried about you living alone. I pulled out my phone and played one of Martha's recordings. Barry's voice filled the room, clear and unmistakable. The old man's not going to be a problem much longer. Once Martha's gone, we'll have him in a nursing home within a month. Allison's face went white. Where did you get this? Your mother recorded it. She'd been documenting Barry's conversations for months before she died. I played another recording, this one of Barry talking to someone on the phone. I've got everyone convinced the old guy's losing it. His own neighbors think he needs professional care. Once we get him declared incompetent, we can sell the house and pay off our debts. Our debts? Allison whispered. Allison. I handed her the folder containing information about Barry's gambling, the loan documents, the collection notices, the photographs of dangerous-looking men at their house. Allison's hands trembled as she looked through the papers. $70,000, she read aloud. Barry owes $70,000? He's been gambling for years, Allison. All those late nights he said he was working, the business trips that never seemed to generate any income. He was at the casino, or the track, or underground poker games. She was crying now, tears streaming down her face as she stared at evidence of her husband's double life. I don't understand. He told me the business was just going through a rough patch. He said once we sold Mom's house, we could get back on our feet. He's been lying to you about everything, honey, including about me. I showed her the fake medical evaluations Barry had created, the fictional incident reports about my supposed mental decline. Each document was a masterpiece of manipulation, designed to paint me as a confused old man who needed to be controlled. He told Mrs. Henderson that you found me wandering around the neighborhood at 2 a.m, I said. He told Tom from the hardware store that I'd been leaving the stove on and forgetting to turn it off. He even contacted nursing homes and filled out preliminary paperwork to have me committed. Allison was sobbing now, her hands covering her face. Oh God, Dad, I believed him. I actually believed that you were. I thought we were protecting you. Barry is very convincing. Your mother believed him too at first. That's why she started recording his conversations, why she hired a private investigator. She needed proof of what he was really doing. I sat down next to my daughter and gently took her hands. They were cold, shaking. Allison, I need you to understand something. Barry didn't just lie about the gambling or about my mental health. He convinced you to throw your own father out of his home on the day you buried your mother. He made you believe that cruelty was kindness. She looked up at me with red, swollen eyes. I'm so sorry, Dad. I'm so sorry. I don't know how I could have. Because you trusted your husband. Because you loved him and believed he had our best interests at heart. Barry exploited that love, used it against both of us. We sat in silence for a long time. Allison cried while I held her, the way I used to when she was small and had scraped her knee or been hurt by mean kids at school. But this wound was deeper than anything childhood had inflicted. What do I do now? She asked finally. That's up to you, honey. But you need to know that Barry isn't going to change. When desperate people get cornered, they don't become honest. They become more dangerous. As if summoned by our conversation, we heard a car door slam in the driveway. Barry was home early. Allison's face went pale. He can't know you're here. He can't know that I know about the gambling. Why not? Because. She looked around the room like she was seeing it for the first time. Because I don't know what he'll do. If he's been lying about everything. If he owes money to those people in the photographs. The front door opened. Barry's voice called out, "Honey, I'm home. Why are all the lights on?" I stood up, my decision made. "It's time for the truth to come out, Allison." Barry walked into the living room and stopped dead when he saw me. His expression went through several rapid changes: surprise, anger, calculation, and finally, a forced smile. "Lawrence, what a surprise. How did you get here? I thought you were staying at that motel." "I came to talk to my daughter." Barry's eyes darted to the papers scattered on the coffee table, to Allison's tear-stained face. I could see him trying to assess how much damage had been done, how much he could still control. "Honey," he said to Allison, his voice taking on that concerned tone I now recognized as manipulation. "Is your dad having one of his episodes? Maybe we should call Dr. Peterson." "There are no episodes, Barry," Allison said quietly. "There never were." Barry's mask slipped for just a moment. I saw the real man underneath, calculating, desperate, dangerous. "Allison, you're upset. Your father's confused you somehow." $70,000, she said, standing up to face him. "You owe $70,000 in gambling debts." Barry went very still. "Who told you that?" I stepped forward, no longer afraid of this man who had stolen my daughter's love and turned it into a weapon against me. "Your lies are over, Barry, all of them." For a moment, I thought he might try to brazen it out, to find some new lie that would explain everything away. But then I saw something change in his face. The desperation became something harder, more dangerous. "You have no idea what you've done, old man," he said, his voice low and threatening. "Those men in the photographs don't care about family drama or legal documents. They want their money, and this house was going to be their money." "Then you'll have to find another way to pay them," I said. Barry laughed, but there was no humor in it. "There is no other way. Do you think I wanted to do this? Do you think I enjoyed manipulating your precious daughter, making her believe her father was losing his mind? I had no choice." "There's always a choice," I said. "No," Barry said, and I saw the man Martha had been afraid of, the man who would do anything to survive. "There isn't. And now, because of your meddling, because of Martha's paranoid scheming from beyond the grave, we're all going to pay the price." Barry's threat hung in the air like smoke from a fire that was about to consume everything. Allison stepped between us, her voice shaking but determined. "Get out, Barry. Get out of this house right now." He stared at her like she'd spoken in a foreign language. "What did you just say?" I said, "Get out. Pack your things and leave. Tonight." Barry's face twisted into something ugly. "You can't throw me out of my own house, Allison. We're married. This is community property. Community property that's about to be seized by the people you owe money to," she said, her voice growing stronger. "Dad, how long before those men in the photographs come looking for their payment?" I didn't have to answer. Barry's expression told us everything we needed to know. "They gave me 2 weeks, he said, the bravado draining out of his voice. "That was 5 days ago." 9 days, Allison said quietly. "We have 9 days before dangerous criminals come to our house looking for you." She turned to me and I saw Martha's strength in her face, the steel that had helped my wife fight cancer and Barry's manipulation at the same time. "Dad, I need to know something. The restraining order Mr. Patterson mentioned, is it filed?" Barry's head snapped toward me. "Restraining order?" "It was filed 3 days ago," I said. "Barry, you're legally prohibited from coming within 500 feet of me or my house." "Your house?" He laughed bitterly. "That house has been in Martha's family for 4 generations. You worked at a hardware store for 40 years. You think your measly paycheck paid for any of it?" The old shame tried to rise in my chest, but it couldn't take hold. Martha's love had built walls around that insecurity, walls that Barry could no longer breach. "You're right," I said calmly. "I never made much money, but I loved your wife's mother with everything I had for 32 years. I held her hand through cancer treatments, sat by her bedside every night when she was dying, and promised her I'd be okay without her." I looked around the room that had never felt like home to me, at the bills on the counter and the evidence of Barry's lies scattered on the coffee table. Martha made sure I'd be okay by protecting what we built together. Not just the house, Barry, but the life we shared, the trust we had, the family we raised. You tried to steal all of that, but you failed. Barry's face was red now, veins standing out on his forehead. You sanctimonious old fool. You have no idea what the real world is like. Marriage is a business arrangement. Love is a luxury people like me can't afford. Allison was staring at her husband like she'd never seen him before. People like you? People who take risks? Barry said. People who aren't content to work at the same dead-end job for 4 decades and call it a life. People who want more. People who lie and cheat and manipulate their own wives, she said. Barry's expression turned calculating. He was a gambler, and even now, facing complete exposure, he was looking for an angle, a way to play the odds in his favor. Allison, think about this rationally, he said, his voice taking on that persuasive tone that had worked so many times before. Your father is 65 years old. How much longer is he going to live? 5 years? 10? When he dies, everything will come to you anyway. Why not speed up the process? Help him transition to professional care while he can still adjust. The coldness of it took my breath away. He was trying to convince my daughter to warehouse me so he could gamble away my home. But Allison wasn't the same woman who had thrown my suitcases on the porch 4 days ago. The scales had fallen from her eyes. Because he's my father, she said simply. Because I love him. Because throwing him out of his own home was the cruelest thing I've ever done, and I'm going to spend the rest of my life trying to make up for it. Barry's last card had been played and lost. I watched him realize that his power over Allison was gone, that his careful manipulation had crumbled in a single evening. Fine, he said, the mask finally dropping completely. Fine, but don't think this is over. You have no idea what you've done to both of us. He grabbed his jacket from the closet and headed for the door. At the threshold, he turned back one last time. Those men I owe money to, they're not going to care about restraining orders or family reconciliation. When they come looking for payment, they'll start with you, Allison. Then they'll move on to your precious father. The door slammed behind him, leaving us in a silence that felt both terrifying and liberating. Allison collapsed onto the sofa, her head in her hands. What have I done, Dad? What have I done to both of us? I sat down beside her and pulled her close. You've done what your mother would have wanted. You've chosen love over fear. Over the next week, things moved quickly. Richard Patterson helped Allison file for divorce and obtained a restraining order protecting her from Barry. The police took Barry's threats seriously enough to increase patrols around both our houses. The men Barry owed money to never came. As it turned out, they were more interested in cutting their losses than escalating a situation that was already drawing police attention. Barry, faced with the collapse of his schemes and the prospect of criminal charges for fraud and forgery, disappeared. The last anyone heard, he was seen boarding a bus to Las Vegas, apparently convinced that one more big win would solve all his problems. I moved back into my house a week after the confrontation. Allison helped me unpack, and as we worked, we talked. Really talked, for the first time since she was a child. She told me about the slow erosion of her confidence, how Barry had convinced her that she was too emotional, too trusting, too naive to make important decisions without him, how he'd isolated her from friends who might have questioned his behavior, from family members who might have offered different perspectives. I told her about the loneliness of the past few years, how Martha's illness had consumed so much of our energy that I'd lost track of what was happening to our daughter, how I'd trusted Barry because Allison loved him, never imagining that love could be weaponized against us both. The healing wasn't quick or easy. There were days when I saw the guilt in Allison's eyes and wanted to tell her it was all forgiven, all forgotten. But Martha's letters had taught me something about the difference between forgiveness and boundaries. I could forgive my daughter while still protecting myself from future manipulation. We established new rules for our relationship. Allison would rebuild her life without my financial support. She needed to learn she was strong enough to stand on her own. I would be available for emotional support, for family dinners, for the grandfather relationship I hoped to have with any future grandchildren, but I wouldn't be anyone's safety net or ATM. 3 months after Barry disappeared, I was working in Martha's garden when Allison came by with coffee and the newspaper. Dad, she said, settling into the chair beside me. I've been thinking about something. I looked up from the tomato plants I was staking. Martha had always said they needed good support to grow properly. What's that, honey? I want to understand why Mom never told you about transferring the house, why she felt like she had to protect you in secret. It was a fair question, one I'd been wrestling with myself. I think your mother knew that if she told me what Barry was doing, I would have confronted him directly. And maybe that confrontation would have driven you away permanently. Allison nodded slowly. She was probably right. If you'd told me Barry was manipulating me, I would have defended him. I would have chosen him over you. Your mother was a teacher for 30 years, I said. She understood that you can't force people to learn. You can only create the conditions where learning is possible. I gestured toward the garden around us, toward the house that stood solid and safe behind us. She created the conditions for you to discover the truth yourself. All the evidence, all the documentation, all the legal protections. She built a foundation strong enough to hold us both when Barry's lies finally collapsed. Allison was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "I miss her. So do I, honey. Every day. Do you think she knew? Do you think she knew we'd find our way back to each other?" I thought about Martha's final letter, about the faith she'd placed in both of us even as she was dying. I think your mother knew that love is stronger than manipulation, I said. She knew that Barry could twist your feelings for a while, but he couldn't change who you really are. That evening, after Allison had gone home to the apartment she'd found across town, I sat on the porch where Martha and I used to watch the sunset together. The house felt different now, not empty, but peaceful. The ghosts of Barry's presence were gone, swept away by honesty and the slow return of family love. I pulled out my phone and looked at a text message I'd received that morning. It was from Mrs. Henderson next door. "Lawrence, I owe you an apology. I realize now that Barry was filling my head with stories about you that weren't true. I should have known better. You and Martha raised a good daughter, and she's lucky to have you back in her life." Similar messages had been coming in all week. Neighbors, former co-workers, even Dr. Morrison from my old practice had reached out to apologize for believing Barry's lies about my mental decline. The rehabilitation of my reputation had happened organically, without effort on my part. Truth, it turned out, was a powerful antiseptic. Once Barry's lies were exposed, they crumbled quickly, taking his credibility with them. I wasn't angry at the people who had believed him. Barry had been a master manipulator, skilled at exploiting people's natural concern for elderly neighbors and family members. He told them exactly what they needed to hear to make them complicit in his schemes. But they were free of his influence now, just as Allison and I were free. As the sun set behind the maple tree Martha had planted when we first moved into the house, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months: contentment, not happiness exactly. Martha's absence was still a constant ache, but a sense of rightness, of being exactly where I belonged. The house was mine, legally and emotionally. My daughter was rebuilding her life with courage and determination. The family that Barry had tried to destroy with lies and manipulation was stronger now, built on a foundation of truth that no one could shake. Martha's garden was flourishing in the late summer heat. The tomatoes were heavy on the vine, the roses were blooming again, and the herbs she'd planted were filling the evening air with their fragrance. I closed my eyes and imagined I could hear her humming the way she used to when she worked in the soil, planting next year's flowers, believing in futures she might not be there to see. But she was there, in the legal documents that protected me, in the daughter who had found her way home, in the love that had proved stronger than every lie that had been told against it. Martha had fought her last battle and won it, even from beyond the grave, and I was finally, truly free. Now I'm curious about you who listened to my story. What would you do if you were in my place? Have you ever been through something similar? Comment below, and meanwhile, I'm leaving on the final screen 2 other stories that are channel favorites, and they will definitely surprise you. Thank you for watching until here.